a valid argument in any way to this whole talk about the opposition being responsible for this? I'm not saying that they are, but if they were, does it not give the presidency some sort of, I don't know what the word you use now is, like, is there any valid argument at all to say that this is political?
For those that followed the evolution of Boko Haram, I read a couple of things, and interestingly, I was in the north in 2005 when the sect was in a dormancy kind of stage where they hadn't become this virulent and violent. And I had a friend that, you know, told me about them. They were not like this, but they were political, yes. And, you know, if you remember very clearly, my third sign that happened in Kano was also in a state where the opposition was in power, and the government at that time assumed that it was an opposition thing until my third sign, you know, killed so many people in Kano at that time, and then they took it seriously and pursued those guys out of the country, where Buhari at that time even pursued them into a neighboring country. And that's the scenario we're having now. You can't unwrap things from politics. It's an opposition state, and we know that the Boko Haram member was in the cabinet of the former governor, Alimodu Sheriff, and all of that. So, I mean, you can't unwind that. But, and that's the big but, you are the president of the country. That part of the country is not, you don't carve out that part of the country and say, I'm not the president of this part. What it means that you're when you campaign for leadership in this country, what it means is that you're taking full responsibility for all of the country, you see. So when you say opposition is making this place ungovernable, it means that you're not taking the responsibility for that area. You're sort of throwing your hands in the air and saying, I can't do anything about this. We don't want that kind of presidency.
Yeah. Well, he has at least 1 year or 5, depending on what he decides to do next year and if Nigerians decide to vote him back. But at least he has 1 year left in this tenure. What do you think he can still achieve with security in the next year?
I think the things we hear that I think the presidency needs to take seriously. The people that will keep this security are the soldiers. And we hear all sorts of things. We heard about the mutiny where in Mamlari Barracks, where the GOC was shot at by soldiers. We hear soldiers giving interviews to foreign media and even domestic media talking about despicable living conditions and all of that. And we're told by the age of the presidency not to take this thing serious. I point people to what happened in Mali when we see this kind of situation. What happened in Mali was that the soldiers were fighting an insurgency in the north. They were fighting against the Tuaregs. And as they were fighting, they complained about things like this. But they were not taken seriously because an election was impending. And what happened eventually was that election never held. When the chief of defense staff of Mali was sent to quell that uprising, they turned on him, and that grew into a coup. I don't pray for that to happen in this case. But we first and foremost need the presidency to take those soldiers seriously. It's not a case of throwing money at them. We hear cases of Boko Haram fighters being better equipped than our army. I know that our army, the military guys, the soldiers themselves they're trained, and they know how to fight. But you see, you need to equip them. They need to have proper logistical support. They need to have proper intelligence. And those are not things that are dependent on the gallantry of our soldiers. They're dependent on the structures. So that's the first thing. We need to make sure that our soldiers can actually fight.
And also mentally ready.
Exactly. And I believe that we need to defeat Boko Haram militarily before, if ever, we want to negotiate and solve the problems of the north, of the northeast, where they are from. We need to defeat them militarily. The state needs to have a monopoly of violence. That's what it means to have a state in a place where nobody else can. I cannot just come and kill you because I don't like you. If I don't like you, I go to the state and say I don't like this guy, and they ask me why don't you like this guy, and if my reasons are valid, then the state can take action. So that needs to be re-exerted in the northeast before we start talking about all of the things.
Okay, I know if we're going with security, we can go on and on the show today because I mean it is a big deal and everybody is really, really worried. But let's move on now to power, which of course has also sort of shaped Mr. President's presidency in the last 3 years. A lot happened in the last year, you know, with discos and gencos. A lot of people have been throwing those words around now, and some of them have been sold, some have been. I've started working. I mean, I've started getting bills from one of them actually. So, how would you score him so far in 3 years?
On power, first I need to commend him for something. The power reform started in 2005 with the law passed by the then President Obasanjo. And, you know, they pushed it and pushed it. These things are a process, and they pushed it up to a level. And I remember very clearly that in the immediate past President Yar'Adua's tenure, there was a law in implementing that power roadmap. So I must commend the president first for the fact that he revisited this power roadmap, didn't redesign a new power roadmap, but decided to implement that one and all of that. Having said that, I also must commend him that they've been able to get this ball rolling. Having said that, I wrote a piece a while ago which I called NEPA Nostalgia. There's a way people function. People function this way. You know, you have this really bad situation in the past, and then somebody tells you, I'm coming to solve the problem of that bad situation. And then, because that solution creates new problems the person never told you, you begin to say, I missed that bad time. So you don't want people to go back to NEPA nostalgia, where people begin to think, and that's where there's an issue. The issues here are that there's a lot happening on the macro level in power, but the micro, informing people about how their lives will change, telling them about the challenges, telling them that, look, you may not have power as much as you used to have for a period because we are solving these problems, but these are the deliverables that we have, and you can measure us by this.
In the short term.
Telling people those things, you know, we're not getting that, and people will begin to lose interest in the... I remember when the mobile telephony reforms were happening. Yeah. I remember there was this serious PR, you know, going on that everybody knew what was happening. That's not happening with power. So we need that to happen. We also need the discos to begin to make money where they actually supply power. We still have a lot of the meters that are prepaid, postpaid meters.
Or even no meters.
Or no meters. We need to get that out of the way and make sure that, you know, everybody can get a prepaid meter, and then
you're paying for what
you're getting. Those are the two things I think needs to be done in the short term, immediately. A proper PR campaign to let people know what's going on, and making sure that the revenue that the discos are getting are from power that they actually supply, that people actually consume. No issues of bills that are estimated bills that we have with the postpaid system. Yeah. Those are the things I think.
Yeah, just to be clear, discos are distribution companies, Gencos are generation companies. But some people have said that in all of this, the biggest clog is the transmission, which it has not been sold, or will not be sold at least anytime soon. There's a management sort of contract with Manitoba that was very controversial, and we still don't know how solid it is yet, with also staff trying to, you know, protesting over the time, and we hear some of them are going to be disengaged and get paid off. How well do you think the transmission part is going to have to be fixed for all of this to work?
It's it's like it's what distributes the power, really. So it has to be fixed. But I think that we need to understand that things don't get resolved at a go. You solve this problem, take it out of the way. You solve the next problem, take it out of the way. So we've removed the Genco problems, generation problems. We've removed the disco problems, which is the end consumer problems. We still have that transmission bit in between. But as time goes on, if the Gencos today start generating, say, 30,000 megawatts or 40,000 megawatts, it will be clear to everybody that transmission cannot handle that. And then that problem will be solved. Having said that, again, it boils down to transparency. The issues around the Manitoba and that whole transaction was that people didn't know what was happening. So we had to ask, probe, protest, and do all of that before we got that information. We need a government that will volunteer information and let us know what's going on without people having to resort to disruptive means to get information.
Another very burning issue, of course, is that with employment, and I'm going to talk about, you know, agriculture, investments. There's been a lot of sort of good and bad stories coming out of there. Agriculture seems to be one of the bright spots, even though it's had a few of its issues as well. Yeah. With investment, we heard about the ban on imported cars. Now we're supposed to be manufacturing cars. People think the bill is a little weird and controversial as well. But how do you think all of that is going to tie into employment generation at the end of the day?
For agriculture, there's good parts, but I have my reservations, and I'll tell you what I mean. To solve the agricultural problem, food sufficiency and all of those things, it goes beyond what we're doing. This is a start, but it goes beyond what we're doing, and that's the problem. We don't think holistically to solve our problems. Again, the other thing, in relation to employment, agriculture is something that employs periodically, you see, and people don't need employment periodically. They need to be employed all around the year. That's why agriculture is not the solution to employment. It can solve some problems in that gap and create a value chain, but it's not the solution. Some of the solutions, for example, are glaring. Take, for example, tomatoes. Tomatoes are produced en masse in the north. I live there, so I saw it happen real life. But about 80% of the tomatoes get what's the word now? Get spoil. Let me use the Nigerian parlance. I'm fighting for that word. Spoil in transit, because they come by road and all of that. Now, we have the presidency boasting of revamping the rail system and all of that. I don't think passenger traffic can still go on those things. They take too long. But we can start doing, cargo and get refrigerated coaches and solve this instead of importing tomatoes from Togo and from places that we shouldn't even be going to, Burkina Faso, and bringing tomatoes from there. We bring tomatoes from these places. There's jobs created there. There's jobs for the guys that are moving it, and prices will go down. Those are the kind of end-to-end solutions that will create the kind of employment. It's not a case of these things that we're saying. So for employment, I believe firmly that what will solve our employment problems is harnessing what we have already. I'll give you an instance. My mom, when I was growing up, told me a story of Babangida. When he went to Abia State, there's this market, area, that's what it's called. Yeah. And they make they used to make a lot of imitation stuff there. And they said he came into the market, he was wearing a pair of shoes. By the time he came out at the other end of the market, they presented him an imitation pair of shoes, exactly like what he was wearing. We have that kind of potential that we are not harnessing.
Very true.
And those things are the things that will create the kind of jobs that we're looking for. And our markets are not far. Yeah. The higher percentage of the markets that China explores is not far away. It's still in Southeast Asia. So we have a lot of smaller countries around us that we can sell all of these imitation goods and all of those things to. Yeah. So I'm just saying that there are things on ground already that we can harness, that we can get government support for, and we'll begin to... What will create jobs is manufacturing. We can't say that too much.
Yeah. It's a very interesting point you got up there. And I just wanted to touch very quickly now on policy, which is something that I think a lot of people have had issues with this government. Policy reversals. Today something is banned, tomorrow it's allowed to come in, and the next day it's 10% VAT, and the next day it's no VAT. It's almost as if there's really no consistency in a lot of these things, which is also a problem for people even trying to invest and create employment. Our government needs to be a lot more thorough with what they do. What I mean is this: I don't want a minister to come out. We had that with the automotive policy, where a minister came out to announce a policy, and then said they were still considering. Nobody has seen that policy document. Nobody had looked at it. And you already made an announcement.
Announcement on that policy. We cannot have that. We cannot have a minister talk about book tariffs, and then you say, oh, you've now gone back to consult and you don't think that this should happen. You should have done those consultations, and that's what we need to have. Thoroughness in the process of drafting policy documents.
Let's end on one might just be a little bright note with sports, which some have said he's the most successful sports president Nigeria has ever had. We won 2 major tournaments last year under him. Yes. Do you think it's a lot of credit to him or more to the teams who have done this? Since the World Cup is coming.
The World Cup is coming. I mean, I'll give it to him. Let me be nice. Let me be nice.
Thank you very much, man. It's been great chatting with you. Hopefully in the next year we'll have better things to talk about.
Amen.
When we come back, we'll be having a discussion on the arts. Please do stay with us.